Hey there YouTube, welcome to another episode of Jodo's Garage. Today we're going to work on the rear bumper and do some metal fab, some plasma cutting, welding, a lot of stuff you guys like. Let's get to it. Back to working on the rear end as we're waiting for the hinge to come in, which hopefully should be today, not today then tomorrow. So in order to mount this up, the back side of this has to be lifted up to the inverted floorboard, but as you can see, this is not very strong by itself. So in order to tighten that up, thing we're going to execute on the idea that I had with the bumper to recess that into this area right here. So cut out the outline there, and then sink it about halfway into the rail cavity and then weld it onto that. So that would mean its strength onto the frame, and then on the inside I can weld this lip onto the inside of that bumper, and then I get some strength back in that floor, at which point I can then mount all that stuff underneath. The pump is going to be a little issue in itself. You see that black bracket on the floor there, and the pump is the silver part with the hard lines coming out. Because I pushed everything back and they're hard lines, that bracket is on a lot of tension, and I only can get one of the bolts in, not both sides. So I'm gonna have to do some modifying on that to make sure that it works and that it doesn't kink any lines. So that'll be next, but I want to make sure that I get this box mounted up here so that I know where everything's gonna land, and then I can make a new bracket accordingly. I'd probably reuse that bracket there and just modify it to the needs of the new situation. A lot of cutting and grinding that I spare you guys the speed up version of, but as you can see, we got the bumper sunk in halfway the frame rails, cleaned up the edges, and so now it's time to lay some beads on that to anchor it back to the frame, and then it's going to be one continuous strong section again, which obviously is what we're after. A bunch of welds later, got this tied into the car. Made a weld there, a weld there, just to get the floor to sit at the level that we want to be at. And here we have a bigger gap. So what I've done is got a piece 3 inches, 2 inches this way, 1 inch that way. This is actually a little thicker than my Harbor Freight bender can bend, so you have to get a little creative, a little old trick. Some of you probably already know this, but I just, with the grinder, made a groove on the line where I wanted to bend. Go, about a third or so of the material, and then when you put it in the bender, it only has to bend that part. So nothing wrong with the material here. If you want to be sure, you can always lay a little bead here and there in this. But now what we're going to do, we have to go 2 inches up here to get good coverage up here, because there's a bunch of ribs, or a rib actually right here, so I can't weld to that. This is too close, so I have to get to this part. And then the floor, obviously you don't need as much, so only got the 1 inch there, but you can see that this bumper is curved and the material is flat. So fortunately, you got a solution for that too. Shrink your stretcher. So this is one of the things that I purchased recently, and yeah, let's see how we can modify this piece so that it fits properly. So welded the bumper, front to back. Got that plate welded in. And yeah, so now this bumper is a one piece with the chassis. In other news, we also got the hinge in. So this one is actually working. We can open and close the door. Up to this point we can close it, and now we're starting to run interference on the dash here, so that's a thing that will need to be addressed. Obviously, because this car is so much narrower, we mentioned this before, than the Mustang, the 22, some concessions have to be made. And yeah, so you can see I've already cut off some of the padding here, but we'll have to cut off some of this plastic for this door to fully shut. And so that'll be one of the next things on the list. And once that is done, we can sort of sort the door where it needs to be, and then work on hanging this other fender on the front. And then we can start seeing what it would look like with the hood and all the other front peripherals. All right, so with that plastic piece cut off on the inside of the door, up to that point, we can now close the door. My yellow string up there again. It's not quite lined up. It was lined up when I tied it up, but then the string kind of stretches and it kind of starts sagging. But it also allows us to put that front fender on. So now we're a little bit more balanced side to side. Still got some more cowl work to do, but it's nice to start seeing, you know, the car maturing as we're putting these pieces on. One of the big things that I have to look at now is this. Obviously that can't be there, because that has to be there. And that one has to be there. So I've been toying with the fact whether I can reuse what's on this car, which would be quote unquote the easy solution, because then I can just remain factory harness and all that kind of stuff. Obviously placement is an issue. The other issue is that the hole spacing from this nub to that nub is different than from that hole to this hole, which would mean I'm gonna have to change the length of these arms. So cut them, re-weld them. That's all not a big deal. It's just a matter of getting the stuff in place and you know, cutting it to the right length and then welding it back together again. The other option is that I remain the motor, get rid of these drives, and then get the 67, 68 wiper mechanism installed as it should, and then see if I can hook it up to the existing motor. Now, if I keep the motor in place, that would be easiest. However, we'll have to see if that's even remotely a possibility. And maybe it's a combination of the two, where I keep part of these arms and weld them to the arms of the 67 mechanism. TBD. So this is held on by 3 screws. Come out piece. Connection off. That was a lot easier than I actually initially anticipated. So let's see if and how we can utilize this, but in the meantime, at least I get to have it out of the way to look at all the other parts and how they go together. So this is the unit that came out of the 22. This is the hole spacing for the 67. If I line this hole up and go over there, you can clearly see we're a good 2 to 3 inches off the mark here. So reusing this means having to lengthen the arms here that hold the gearboxes, and then also lengthening the arms that actually make the gearboxes go. That's not that big a deal, that's all doable. But we have to see if there's space for any of this, that we can actually implement this as well. Like I said, it may just be a combination between the this motor and the gearbox for a 67, 68 Mustang. Time will tell, but I'm gonna have to get to a resolution on that sooner rather than later if I want to start welding body panels on, because that's gonna be key. Now for the fine tuning, fender was laying on the car fine, but it was actually not turned in enough at the nose. So this part here had to be cut out because that was interfering with this piece right here. And then further down, this piece is interfering. And so that needs to be removed, and possibly even this lip here. None of this is needed. So I'm just gonna make a cut up and over, and then this whole forward piece should fall down. And I'll measure again with the fender on it, see if that needs to go or not. If it does, well then we'll take it off. If not, then that may help be a mounting point for the fender. That line is starting to look a lot better. Going up through the ridge, onto the door, onto the rear fender. So that's starting to look like something. So this was the problem, of course. This area here was hitting here. This area here was hitting that black piece that I just cut out. And then that other piece that I was talking about maybe cutting out, I just bent it back for now. It's just sitting behind here a little bit, just touching the light bucket right there, but not necessarily in the way, so I'm gonna keep it for now. Do the same thing on the other side, and then we're gonna maybe get the front end back in and see how close that is. So on to the driver's side. All right, so I couldn't resist trying to see what it would look like with the hood. So I put that on there. Which looks really cool. And we got the fender and the door on this side. Now, this looks like a lot of progress, which obviously is not. The hood's just laying there, front end is taped on and just put in place. My biggest issue still is right here, having enough or lack of width to pull the fenders close enough to the cowl. And I think that still has to do with the fact that I'm not at that 53 mark from here to the other side. I'm at 54, so that inch that I'm missing going across is about that inch that I'm lacking here, which I'm gonna have to go back to having a look at that. And then I also need the Shelby piece to go in from here to there with the length of this hood. Other than that, this is starting to look pretty snazzy. And just like that, back to square one. So when I had built up the body with all the panels and everything, I wasn't able to get this measurement. For those of you that have seen previous episodes, this from this side to that side is supposed to be 53 inches, and from the hip to the other hip is 56 inches. I got to about 54 on the inside lip here, and I put the windshield in it. That seemed to be okay. So I'm like, okay, well, if I can't get any further, then that must be it, and I'll just work it like that. But as you probably saw when I put my hood on, the gap, well, actually even the fender, between the fender and the cowl, the gaps are just too big. So I really need that 1 inch to get narrower. So I took everything back apart, as you can see, and back working at narrowing that down. And yeah, I took a long time working on that last time already. So a little bit puzzling to see, you know, where it's gonna come from, but we'll keep working at it and see what we find.
Well, success at last. Nobody said it was easy, but from my center line on the dash to the corner, 26.5. So I have 26.5 on both sides. That gets me my 53 on the lip. So it involved quite a bit of cutting. The dash right here, dash parts right here. But then mainly, and that's the last thing that I figured out, was this metal tube here was interfering with some of the inside strengthening panels, if you will. And so now that we got that out of the way, it's a 26.5 where it needs to be. So that's freaking awesome. Time to move on to the other side, get that one there too. I'm not sure what all I have to do on that side, but I'm sure it's going to be similar to the driver's side to get to that 26.5. And once I get it there, then I got to start putting back things back together and then see if the cowl fits better and the fenders, etc. One of the other added advantages of the Stringline Tech is because I have my center line, it can easily show whether you're on center with your cowl. Right now, obviously, it's sitting just a hair off, but part of that is caused by the fact that now that we have our outside panels in place, I'm gonna have to find the new center and placement of this. However, we're hitting in this area right here, on the metal over there, and then the same thing is happening on this side where we're hitting here. So I made some markings. We're gonna cut some more on the cowl and then refit. See how we do. All right, so after a lot of cutting and measuring and everything else, we're back to having the door back on, having the fender on the car, laying on the car. So what I've done is I set up my laser and I put the line, you can see it on the crease right here. So you can see it on the red mark. You see it a little bit better on the silver instead of the blue. And then as we go back, same thing here, same thing here. So we're following this line from the air intake all the way through the door. Now, because this isn't mounted yet, it's not 100%, but it's right on the crease there. And then it's a little bit harder to see because it's getting out of range, but it's right on the crease there. So that means that our crease line from the intake through the door and the fender is now one straight line. You gotta love those lasers, because how else would you get to that string line, I suppose. But again, this is just hanging on the car. Nothing's mounted as far as the fender goes. But the biggest thing that I had an issue with before was the gap between the cowl and the fender. Now, knowing that the fender has to come in slightly more yet, that looks like a pretty decent gap from what I've seen in other cars. Obviously this area needs to be worked a little bit. Gappage is not exactly the same. We're very tight over here, and we start coming out to a decent door gap actually here, and then the fender is kind of coming out because it's not mounted to the bottom yet. But as we pull that in, you can see that there's definitely differences in door gap. So that'd be something that needs to be addressed as we go along. But pretty damn happy that my car width, my opening for the window finally has properly been addressed, which means now that it's only forward. I'm sure there's going to be some back steps, but in the meantime, it's what we're trying to accomplish here, and that's been one of my Achilles heels there, is trying to get that width of the bottom window opening right. Thought I had it good enough, but as you guys saw, it wasn't, because that gap between the cowl and the fender was just way too big, and now that's within acceptable limits. So excited. Onto the driver's side door and fender there. So one way to find the center is take a compass and make a line at 3 different spots, and where the 3 spots intersect, that's where your center is, which is right there. Started out, made it a little bit too big. I dialed it down, and it brought me exactly to that point over here. So we're going to put a center punch in there and then drill it out for the pilot hole. So with the pilot hole drilled and the extended bit, I can steer that right in there. So you want to start very lightly with the pressure, so it can start digging into these edges here where it's not completely the 6-inch circle. And then as you go through it, it will find its way. My battery has to die. Continue. And there you have it. Another nice round hole for that light. As you can see, now that we've got that hole drilled, we've got a very nice opening for the headlight with a very minimal exposure around it. About, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so all the way around. Sits nicely, so with some adjustment out back, you'll be able to center that real nice. Didn't film much of this, but just grinding anyway. So what we've done is we've removed the lip here all the way down across, smooth this out where needed, and then taking our piece of metal, that's our cutoff, with the plasma cutter, took this piece and cut that 2 or 3 inches off of here. And that went pretty well, actually, for keeping a nice straight line. I used the ruler as a straight edge, so that helped. And yeah, now we gotta put that on the car, and then it's time to weld it on. So this is what it looks like when it's clamped on the car. Again, it was a piece that was 1 foot wide, and I took 2 3/4 inches off of it. And that makes it so that it sits about 1 inch or so above the pinch weld, and that gives me a line where my rocker, and this is in my scenario the way I have it jacked off the ground, this line here is 22 inches off the floor, and so I can check that front to back all the way to make sure that I'm sitting nice and level. And that seems to be working in my case. So now it's time to lay out the other side and cut that, and then we can repeat the process. Also here we still have the sill piece here that needs to be cut, so I'm taking the original pinch weld off, and then the way I have it on the opposite side is that I have about ½ inch or so overhang below this part. This part is going to get welded to the new piece of metal, and then that way sort of becomes the new pinch weld, but I get rid of all this extra metal that I don't need. So looked a lot like a car. Now it's back to a skateboard. 5 steps forward, 7 steps back. So this is how I set up my level to be a guide. Basically get about 3/8 to ½ inch or so. It basically is determined by the tip where flame comes out to the white piece where it hits the level. So I put my tip on the piece and then put it against the level, put the level against the cup, and then clamp it down with a clamp. Do that on both sides, double check. Once you get that one done, come back here, make sure, because sometimes when you move it, it will influence how this one sits. This one is sitting perfect, so we're gonna cut that. There, well, a little bit more than expected. I think I need to put a new tip on, really, but I didn't do that. So for the next cut I probably should. But we got through it. A little bit more back and forth than I would normally like, but we got it done. We'll take some of the slag off with the hammer. So after you cut off the slag with the hammer, you get a pretty nice straight line. And that's how we get to make that side panel like that. Don't forget to tune in next time when we start working on suspension, putting some lowering springs on, and continue with the metal work and putting the side panels back on this car.